The bass from the speakers throbbed through the floor of Eclipse Lounge, a high-end nightclub in downtown Atlanta, vibrating into every bone of the people packed inside. Neon lights sliced through the darkness in flashes of blue and purple, illuminating bodies moving freely, shamelessly, as if the world outside didn't exist. Vivian Carter stood near the bar, one hand wrapped around a glass of sparkling water, the other adjusting the curve-hugging emerald green dress that clung unapologetically to her plus-size frame. She had learned long ago that shrinking herself, physically or emotionally, only made the world feel bigger and crueler. Tonight, she chose confidence, even if it felt heavy on her chest. She hadn't planned to come out. Clubs weren't her usual space. Too loud, too many eyes, too many unspoken judgments. But her best friend Nia had dragged her out, insisting that heartbreak didn't heal in silence. "Viv, please," Nia had begged earlier. "You spend all your time working and hiding. Tonight, just live." So Vivian came, and now, standing under the glittering lights, she wondered if that decision would change her life forever. Across the room, Ethan Blackwood had stopped listening to the conversation happening at his VIP table. Champagne bottles glistened under the lights, women laughed too loudly, and men spoke in half-boasts and business jargon. It was all familiar, too familiar. Ethan was 29, heir to the Blackwood real estate empire, raised in luxury, groomed for perfection. He wore his wealth effortlessly, tailored black shirt, expensive watch, quiet authority. Yet his eyes were restless, scanning the room like he was searching for something he didn't. "Okay," she said. They talked. About music, about travel, about how crowded rooms could feel lonely. Vivian didn't mention her insecurities, and Ethan didn't mention his last name. For the first time in a long while, both felt normal. When Ethan asked her to dance, Vivian hesitated. "I don't really. It's okay if you don't," he said gently. "We can just stand." That kindness undid her. On the dance floor, they moved slowly, the world blurring around them. His hands rested respectfully at her waist, not possessive, not hesitant. She felt seen not as a statement, not as a body, but as a woman. By the end of the night, Ethan walked her to her car. "I'd like to see you again," he said. Vivian swallowed. "You say that now. I mean it." She gave him her number. What Vivian didn't know was that Ethan Blackwood had never felt this way before. Their first date wasn't extravagant. Coffee, conversation, laughter, then dinner, then walks through the park. Weeks passed, and feelings deepened into something undeniable. One evening, Ethan finally told her the truth. "My family is well known," he said carefully. "My mother especially." Vivian laughed softly. "Everyone's mother is something." "No," he said. "Mine is judgmental." The warning sat heavy between them. Ethan's mother, Margaret Blackwood, ruled her world with precision. Old money, old values, appearances mattered. Image was everything. When Ethan finally brought Vivian home for dinner, Margaret's smile froze the moment she opened the door. She saw everything she disapproved of in one glance. The body, the confidence, the fact that they met in a club. Dinner was polite, cold, calculated. Later that night, Margaret confronted her son. "You will not marry that woman," she said flatly. Ethan stared at her. "Excuse me? She is not suitable. She embarrasses this family." Ethan's voice shook, not with fear, but with rage. "You don't know her." "I know enough." But Ethan already knew something else. For the first time in his life, he was ready to choose love, even if it meant standing alone. And Vivian, lying awake that night, felt the first crack of fear in her happiness, unaware that a storm was already gathering. Vivian sensed the change before Ethan ever spoke about it. It began subtly, calls that came later than usual, pauses in conversations where laughter once lived, a heaviness behind Ethan's eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. Love hadn't faded, but something had entered the space between them, uninvited and unwelcome. They were sitting on her couch one evening, the television playing softly in the background. Vivian's apartment was modest but warm, filled with the scent of vanilla candles, and the quiet comfort of a place earned through hard work. Ethan sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, yet his body felt distant. "Something's wrong," she said softly. Ethan sighed, rubbing his hand over his jaw. "I didn't want to bring it here." "Bring what here?" "My mother." Vivian's heart dipped, though she forced a small smile. "I figured she wouldn't be my biggest fan." "That's an understatement." His voice tightened. She thinks you're not suitable." Vivian leaned back slightly, giving him space, even though it hurt. "Because I'm plus size?" "Because you don't fit her picture of perfection," he corrected. "And because we met in a club. And because you don't come from money." She wrapped all of it. Ethan had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, stood in rooms full of powerful men and held his ground without flinching. But nothing prepared him for the silence Vivian left behind. Her absence was everywhere. In the mornings, when his phone no longer buzzed with her gentle, "Did you sleep well?" texts. In the evenings, when the penthouse felt cavernous instead of luxurious. In the nights when he reached for warmth that wasn't there. Love hadn't ended. It had been amputated, sudden, painful, and bleeding. Vivian, on the other hand, threw herself into survival. She woke early, went to work, smiled when required, and cried in the shower where no one could hear her. Her friends praised her strength, unaware that strength felt like drowning quietly. Every song reminded her of Ethan. Every street corner held a memory. She had loved him enough to walk away. But love didn't leave just because you told it to. Margaret Blackwood believed time would fix everything. She hosted charity galas, set Ethan up with appropriate women. Slim, polished, daughters of powerful families. He attended some events out of obligation, but his eyes were empty, his laughter forced. One evening, Margaret watched him from across the dining table. "You're wasting yourself," she said. "I'm living honestly," Ethan replied. "With a woman who humiliated our family?" Ethan stood abruptly. "You humiliated yourself." The words stunned her. "I loved her," he continued, "and you made her feel small." Margaret's composure cracked. "Love is not enough. For you, maybe," he said quietly. "But for me, it was everything." That night, Ethan made a decision that would ripple through his entire world. 6 months later, Atlanta buzzed with excitement. The Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala was the event of the year. Celebrities, politicians, media cameras. Margaret presided like royalty, confident that her son would stand beside her as always. Ethan arrived alone. Whispers followed him. Cameras flashed. Then the doors opened again. Vivian stepped inside. The room stilled. She wore a deep red gown, elegant and powerful. Her curves celebrated rather than hidden. Her hair framed her face like a crown, and her posture spoke of a woman who had survived heartbreak and risen stronger. Margaret's breath caught. Ethan turned, and the world disappeared. They locked eyes, shock giving way to something deeper, heavier, undeniable. He crossed the room without hesitation. "You came," he said softly. "I almost didn't," Vivian admitted. "But I'm tired of hiding." "So am I." Before she could respond, Ethan turned toward the crowd, toward the microphones, toward his mother. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice steady but fierce. The room hushed. "For most of my life, I've lived according to expectations that were never mine," he continued. "Tonight, I choose truth." He reached for Vivian's hand. "This woman is the love of my life." Gasps rippled through the hall. Margaret stood frozen. "I don't need approval," Ethan said, eyes locked on his mother. "I need respect. And if loving her costs me everything, then it's worth it." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Margaret felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Fear of losing her son forever. Later that night, Margaret requested to see Vivian privately. They sat in a quiet lounge, tension thick. "You have courage," Margaret said slowly. "I underestimated that." Vivian met her gaze. "I don't want to take your son away from you." Margaret swallowed. "I'm the one pushing him away." Silence softened into understanding. "I was wrong," Margaret said at last. Not about the world, but about love. Vivian's breath caught. I can't promise acceptance will come easily, Margaret continued. But I will try. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a beginning. Ethan proposed 2 weeks later. Under the stars. No cameras. No approval needed. Vivian said yes through tears. Love had been tested. And it had won. The ring was heavier than Vivian expected. Not because of the diamonds, but because of what it represented. Commitment. Defiance. Visibility. News of Ethan Blackwood's engagement spread like wildfire. Within hours, blogs picked it up. Within days, it was everywhere. Billionaire heir engaged to plus-size woman he met in a club. Blackwood family scandal or love story? Is this real love? Or a rebellion? Vivian tried not to read the comments. She failed. Some were kind. Many were cruel. He could have done better. Money really does make people desperate. She trapped him. Each word carved a small wound. Together they bled. Ethan watched her grow quieter, her laughter thinning around the edges. Let's run away, he said one night, pulling her into his arms. Private ceremony. No noise. Vivian shook her head. If we hide now, we'll always be hiding. She lifted her chin. I won't marry you in shame. Ethan kissed her forehead, pride swelling in his chest. Then we face it together. Margaret faced a different battle. Her friends questioned her. Her social circle whispered. Invitations were rescinded and alliances strained. Are you really letting him go through with this? One woman asked over brunch. Margaret smiled tightly. I am learning to let my son live. It wasn't easy. But for the first time, Margaret saw how fiercely Ethan loved Vivian. And she saw how gracefully Vivian carried pain without bitterness. Slowly, reluctantly, respect began to replace resentment. Wedding planning was chaos. Designers hesitated when they saw Vivian's size. One stylist even suggested something slimming. Vivian left in tears. That night, she stood in front of the mirror, hands trembling. Maybe your mother was right, she whispered. Ethan spun her around, eyes blazing. Never say that again. He knelt, pressing his forehead to her stomach. This body holds the woman I love, the woman I'm marrying. Her tears fell freely. For the first time, she believed him completely. The day before the wedding, Margaret knocked on Vivian's door. She held a velvet box. My wedding necklace, Margaret said quietly. It's been in our family for 3 generations. Vivian's eyes widened. Are you sure? Margaret nodded. I want you to wear it. It wasn't just acceptance. It was surrender. On the wedding day, sunlight poured through the cathedral windows. Vivian walked down the aisle, radiant, powerful, unashamed. Ethan's breath caught. Margaret stood, tears in her eyes. When the vows were spoken, there was no doubt left in the room. Love had not just survived. It had transformed everyone it touched. Marriage didn't soften the world's gaze. It sharpened it. Vivian learned that within weeks of becoming Mrs. Vivian Blackwood, the Blackwood name opened doors she never asked to enter and exposed her to rooms where she wasn't sure she was welcome. Charity luncheons, board dinners, social events thick with perfume and polite smiles that didn't reach the eyes. She stood beside Ethan, graceful and composed, while whispers slithered behind her back. That's her. She doesn't look like a Blackwood. At night, when the doors closed and the silence returned, she let the mask fall. Ethan noticed. Talk to me, he said one evening as they lay tangled in silk sheets, the city glowing beyond the windows. I feel like I'm constantly auditioning for a role I didn't apply for, Vivian admitted. Wife, daughter-in-law, trophy, joke. Ethan kissed her shoulder. You are none of those things. You are my home. She smiled, but fear lingered. Love after I do wasn't a fairy tale. It was work. It was choosing each other when the world questioned the choice. Margaret watched them closely. She saw how Ethan's hand always found Vivian's back, steady and protective. How Vivian never tried to overshadow him, yet never diminished herself. How love between them wasn't loud, it was deliberate. Still doubt lingered. Until one morning, everything shifted. Vivian stared at the bathroom sink, hands gripping the counter as if it were the only thing holding her upright. 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. Her breath hitched. A baby. Joy rushed in first, warm, overwhelming. Then fear followed, cold and sharp. What if his mother thinks I trapped him? What if the world is cruel to my child? When she told Ethan, his reaction stole her breath. He laughed, then cried, then pulled her into his arms like she was made of light. We're going to be parents, he whispered, awed. She buried her face in his chest. Are you happy? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Margaret did not share their joy at first. She sat stiffly when Ethan announced the news, expression unreadable. That was fast, she said. Vivian felt the old wound reopen. Later that night, Vivian overheard Margaret on the phone. She'll ruin him, Margaret said quietly. And now there's a child. The words sliced deep. Vivian packed a bag. Ethan found her at the door. I heard her, she said, voice trembling. I won't raise a child where I'm barely tolerated. Ethan took her hands, firm and unyielding. We're leaving. They moved out that night. No press, no drama, just love choosing peace. Days passed. Silence from Margaret. Then, one afternoon, a knock. Margaret stood there, older somehow, smaller. I was wrong, she said, tears welling. I was afraid of losing my son. I forgot I was losing my heart too. She placed a hand over Vivian's belly. This child. This is my grandchild. Vivian's tears fell freely. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it opened the future. That night, Ethan held Vivian close. Our love broke cycles, he said. Vivian smiled softly, and built something new. The months that followed were not easy. Pregnancy, though a miracle, brought a storm of its own. Vivian's body changed faster than she expected. Curves became fuller, energy drained. Moods swung like lightning. The media, relentless and invasive, found every opportunity to comment. Will she handle Blackwood motherhood? Ethan Blackwood's wife gaining too much weight? Plus-size pregnant or out of control? Vivian read a few headlines and then slammed her laptop shut. Her stomach knotted. She had hoped that marriage and Ethan's unwavering love would shield her from the cruelty of strangers. But love couldn't guard her from every arrow the world flung. Ethan, however, became her shield. Ignore it, he said firmly, wrapping her in his arms. Every cruel word is nothing compared to what we're building together. But it still hurts, Vivian admitted. I feel exposed, naked to the world. You're never exposed to me, Ethan said, and I will make sure no one diminishes you, ever. Even Margaret noticed. Over time, she came to visit more often, slowly shifting from a cautious observer to someone invested. Her tone softened as she asked about the baby, commented on nursery plans, and even offered advice. Clumsy at first, but sincere. Yet the outside world remained unforgiving. Then came the gala, one of the city's largest social events, and once again the media frenzy followed. Paparazzi snapped photos as Vivian entered the room in a flowing sapphire gown that hugged her pregnant curves with grace. Flashbulbs painted her every move. Whispers followed. Vivian felt her chest tighten. The headlines would read, Billionaire's plus-size pregnant wife stuns? But can she keep up? For a moment, panic surged. She turned to Ethan. I can't do this, she whispered, tears brimming. He took her face gently in his hands. Yes, you can, because this is your life, not theirs. You are beautiful. You are strong. You are mine. Vivian drew a shaky breath. She walked forward, shoulder back, chin high. Every step felt like a battle, but she moved through it like a warrior. By the end of the evening, people weren't talking about her size. They were talking about her elegance, her grace, and the undeniable glow of impending motherhood. Not all battles came from strangers, though. Pregnancy stirred old insecurities, doubts she had buried for years. Would she be a good mother? Could she give Ethan the family he deserved? Was she strong enough to raise a child in a world that never stopped judging? One night, she woke in the middle of a storm. Rain pounded the windows, thunder rattled the walls, and she shook in fear, not from the storm outside, but the storm inside. Ethan was there instantly, holding her. "Talk to me," he said softly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared I'm not enough, that I'll fail." "You won't fail," he said firmly. "Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as a woman. You are enough, Vivian, more than enough, and I will remind you of that every single day of our lives." The words soothed her, but more importantly, the promise mattered. A love that didn't just exist. It fought for her, lifted her, and shielded her when the world tried to tear her down. Weeks later, the storm cleared. Vivian's confidence grew. She began hosting small gatherings, speaking openly about her journey with body positivity and resilience. Social media began to turn in her favor. Headlines shifted. Vivian Blackwood, confidence redefined. Pregnancy glow, the woman who won our hearts. Even Margaret began to take pride. She watched as her son's wife faced the world with poise and courage, realizing that Vivian was more than she could have ever imagined. She had strength. She had heart. She had the love of her son, and that was enough. Vivian learned that storms were inevitable, but love, true love, was the shelter that held firm when everything else was chaotic. And as she rubbed her growing belly, whispering softly to the life inside her, she realized that this was only the beginning. Her love story was far from over. The day Vivian went into labor, the city seemed to hold its breath. Rain had returned, soft and steady this time, as if the world was crying tears of joy along with her. Ethan was at her side, gripping her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement, telling her she was the strongest woman he had ever known. Vivian had spent 9 months preparing for this moment, mentally, physically, emotionally. But no preparation could have matched the raw intensity of holding new life in your arms, the overwhelming ache and joy of becoming a mother. Hours passed like minutes. Pain roared, sweat dripped, hearts raced. And then, with one last earth-shaking cry, their baby arrived. A boy. Vivian barely had the strength to look at him. But when Ethan lifted the tiny, wriggling life into her arms, both of them gasped. He had Ethan's dark eyes and her full lips, a perfect fusion of them both. "Ethan," Vivian whispered, tears streaming down her face. He's perfect. He's ours," Ethan said, voice thick with emotion. "All ours." Margaret waited outside the delivery room, her hands clenched nervously. When the nurse emerged to announce the healthy birth, Margaret's knees went weak. She had always been terrified of her son's choices, but seeing him cradle his son and witnessing the bond he shared with Vivian shattered her fears. When Margaret finally entered the room, she froze. Vivian's hair was damp, her face glistening with sweat, but there was a radiance that no gown or jewelry could ever replicate. Margaret walked forward slowly, eyes wet. "May I?" she asked quietly, nodding toward the baby. Vivian's arms didn't hesitate. Margaret's hand rested lightly on the tiny head. Tears streamed silently down her face. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "Both of you are beautiful." It was the first time Vivian had seen Margaret unguarded, without judgment, without the rigid walls of high society decorum. It was a victory, a surrender, a love realized in a moment beyond words. The days after the birth brought a mixture of elation and exhaustion. Vivian navigated sleepless nights, diaper blowouts, and the piercing guilt that all mothers feel, the question of whether she was doing enough. Ethan never left her side. He bathed the baby, changed diapers, even sang lullabies at 3 a.m. He carried her when she was too tired to stand. He reminded her constantly, "We are a team. You are not alone." The world outside had calmed. Social media shifted its tone again, celebrating Vivian's grace and resilience as a mother, her confidence in embracing her postpartum body, and the love Ethan demonstrated openly and proudly. But life never gave happiness without testing it. 2 months after the birth, an anonymous tabloid story hit the internet. "Ethan Blackwood's wife. Is she hiding a secret?" The article speculated that Vivian's pregnancy had complications, insinuating irresponsibility and carelessness, and suggested that the Blackwood family was disappointed. The tone was sharp, malicious, and untrue. Vivian read it while rocking her son in his nursery. Her chest tightened. Rage, fear, and hurt mingled in one suffocating wave. Ethan walked in, noticing her silence. "What is it?" he asked, brushing a stray hair from her face. Vivian held the phone in trembling hands. They're lying. About us. About me." Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he set his hands firmly on her shoulders. "They're afraid of the truth. That love wins. That life doesn't have to look perfect to be perfect. And we will show them." Vivian felt a surge of courage. For months, she had been quietly learning to trust herself, to stand tall in the face of judgment. Now, with Ethan by her side, she realized the world could shout all it wanted. But their life, their family, their love was untouchable. Together, they drafted a public statement. No defensiveness, no excuses, just truth. Ethan posted it first on social media, then shared it with the tabloids. "Our family is private. Our love is real. We are happy, and no rumor will change that. Vivian is an extraordinary mother and my wife. We stand together always." The response was immediate. Fans, friends, and even strangers rallied behind them. The headlines shifted again, this time celebrating honesty and integrity. And for the first time, Vivian truly believed it. The world could judge, the world could gossip, but love, strong, unwavering love, was enough. As the sun set that evening, Ethan held Vivian on the balcony, their son asleep in the nursery. Rain had stopped. The city glimmered below like a sea of diamonds. "We made it," Vivian whispered. "Yes," Ethan said, lips brushing hers gently. "Through everything, we made it. And nothing will break us. Not now, not ever." Vivian rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the steady warmth of his hand over hers. Life had tested them, society had challenged them, and family had doubted them. But love had carried them through. And now, they had everything they needed: trust, resilience, and each other. The months following the birth were magical, almost surreal. Vivian and Ethan fell into a rhythm as new parents, balancing sleepless nights with stolen moments of laughter and love. Their son, Ethan Jr., became the center of their universe, and even Margaret's heart softened completely. She doted on her grandson, leaving past judgments behind. Socially, the world had started to accept Vivian. Fashion magazines praised her style and elegance. Blogs celebrated her confidence, and fans admired how she navigated motherhood in the public eye. Life seemed to be finally aligning with the love story Vivian had always dreamed of. But happiness, as Ethan had learned long ago, often attracts envy. It started subtly. At one of the Blackwood Foundation events, a new assistant approached Ethan with a folder. "Sir, you may want to see this," she said quietly. Ethan opened it and froze. Inside were photographs, candid shots of Vivian leaving a private dinner, taken by a paparazzo hired specifically to create controversy. Nothing inappropriate, nothing scandalous. Yet the headlines they could manufacture were endless. Vivian Blackwood spotted with mystery man. Trouble in paradise? Ethan's grip on the folder tightened. His jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Who's behind this?" The assistant shook her head. "It's anonymous, sir, but it's gone viral online. Social media is already buzzing." Ethan's first instinct was to protect Vivian, to shield her from the cruelty of the world that had tried to break her before. But Vivian, when he called, answered with calm determination. "I saw it," she said quietly. "It's nothing. I'm not hiding anything. Let them write what they want. I refuse to live in fear." Ethan admired her strength, but he refused to let her face this alone. The situation escalated when a rival real estate magnate, Richard Halston, used the scandal to attempt a corporate takeover of a Blackwood property. He leaked falsified claims to media outlets, implying Vivian's behavior was a liability to Ethan's company. Ethan was furious. He knew his mother would have been horrified at such an attack. Margaret had faced similar social manipulations in her youth, but Ethan was different. He wouldn't cower. He called Vivian to the office. "We need a strategy," he said. "Not for me, but for us. For our family. For our son." Vivian's voice was steady. "Then let's show them who we really are." Together, they spent days planning their response. Instead of issuing defensive statements, they created a campaign celebrating love, family, and authenticity. Ethan gave a heartfelt interview, praising Vivian's courage and integrity. Vivian shared a post about the reality of new parenthood, authenticity, and resilience. The public's response was overwhelmingly positive. Support flooded in from fans and social media influencers. Richard Halston's attempts to manipulate the narrative failed, his malicious rumors collapsing under the weight of truth. Yet the attack left a scar. Vivian had felt the sting of judgment again, a reminder that no matter how strong she became, the world could still test her. At home, late at night, Vivian confessed her fear to Ethan. "I feel like I can never relax. Every step I take is watched, every smile judged. Even with our son." Her voice trembled. Ethan held her close. "I know. But remember this, your strength is what breaks the world's judgment. Your love, your courage, your heart, they are untouchable. I will fight for you every day, and so will our family." Margaret sees that now. She's on our side, fully. Vivian nodded, letting his words anchor her. For the first time, she understood that love wasn't only about the joy of being together. It was about protecting each other, fighting the world as a team, and never letting fear dictate choices. The final test came unexpectedly. Richard Halston attempted one last manipulation, sending an anonymous package to Vivian's home, meant to intimidate her. But the moment Vivian held it in her hands, Ethan was at her side, unwavering. They opened it together, exposing the empty threats for what they were. That night, as rain washed the city streets clean, Vivian and Ethan sat together on the balcony, Ethan Jr. sleeping peacefully inside. "We survived another storm," Vivian said, leaning against Ethan. "Yes," Ethan replied, wrapping an arm around her. "And every storm only makes us stronger. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can break this family. Not the world, not judgment, not fear." Vivian smiled, feeling for the first time since the birth that their life had reached a place of unshakable peace. Their love had weathered scrutiny, envy, and even betrayal. The Blackwood name no longer felt like a cage. It was a shield, and they were its guardians. For Vivian, it was a quiet victory. The world could whisper, the tabloids could speculate, but she had something unassailable: Ethan's love, her son's laughter, and the knowledge that she had faced judgment, storm, and scrutiny and emerged stronger, braver, and unapologetically herself. The weeks that followed marked a turning point. Vivian had emerged from the shadows of judgment stronger than ever. The social whispers, once harsh and sharp, now transformed into admiration and, in some cases, envy. Her confidence radiated from every room she entered, and her elegance was celebrated in lifestyle magazines and social media alike. Yet the true victory lay not in recognition. It lay in how fully she had embraced herself. Ethan watched her in awe, seeing his wife evolve from a woman cautious of the world into one unafraid to claim her place in it. At the same time, Margaret had become not only an ally but a partner in protecting and supporting her son and grandson. Slowly, the Blackwood household felt complete, a family united through love and adversity. It was during a charity gala hosted by the Blackwood Foundation that the full weight of Vivian's triumph became clear. She had been asked to speak publicly about her journey. From the judgment she faced as a plus-size woman who met a wealthy man in a club, to the challenges of motherhood, and finally, to her emergence as a confident, self-assured partner and mother. Vivian approached the podium in a shimmering gold gown, her hair elegantly pinned back. Cameras clicked, social media lit up, but she didn't falter. Her voice rang out clear, confident, and unapologetic. "We live in a world that constantly tells us who we should be, what we should look like, and whom we should love. But love is not a measurement of appearance, background, or social expectation. Love is courage, respect, and commitment. I stand here today not to prove myself to anyone, but to celebrate the power of love and the strength we all carry inside us. The crowd erupted in applause. Margaret, sitting in the front row, allowed herself a proud, unguarded smile. Ethan, holding Vivian's hand, whispered, "You've always been extraordinary. The world just had to catch up." Vivian exhaled, feeling the weight of years of judgment finally lift. But life, even at its highest, tests you again when you least expect it. Richard Halston, humiliated by the collapse of his schemes, made a final attempt to undermine the Blackwoods. This time, it wasn't tabloids or social media. It was the company's board of directors, whom he tried to sway against Ethan by spreading insinuations about Vivian's influence. Ethan, however, met the challenge head-on. He scheduled a meeting with the board, Vivian at his side, and addressed the rumors with calm authority. Vivian spoke too, explaining how their family's unity and integrity guided their decisions, and how love and trust, not gossip, defined them. By the end of the meeting, the board was not only convinced but inspired. Richard's schemes failed entirely, leaving him discredited and isolated in the business community. The victory was sweet, but the true change came quietly. Vivian began to recognize her own strength not through others' validation, but in her ability to face adversity with integrity and grace. She discovered that love was not just about emotion. It was about courage, resilience, and standing firmly in the truth of who she was. Margaret approached her one evening after the gala. "Vivian," she said, her tone softer than ever, "I've been stubborn, foolish, and unfair, but you've taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. Love is bigger than appearances, bigger than expectation. I am proud of you, truly proud." Vivian, holding her grandson in her arms, felt a warmth she had never imagined. "Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know." The past, with its trials, judgments, and fears, had transformed into strength, acceptance, and unity. The Blackwood household was no longer a place of tension and expectation. It was a home of love, respect, and hope. And as Vivian tucked Ethan Jr. into bed that night, watching him sleep peacefully, she whispered softly, "We made it, little one. We survived storms, and now we shine." Ethan joined her in the doorway, wrapping his arms around both mother and child. "Yes," he said quietly, "we did. And this is only the beginning." Vivian leaned into him, feeling the heartbeat of her family, the strength of her love, and the triumph over every shadow that had tried to dim her light. They had fought society's judgment, family expectations, and personal insecurities, and they had won, together. The city outside sparkled, and in that sparkle, Vivian finally felt the full measure of her journey. Love, courage, and family. Unbroken, unshakable, and radiant. The morning sun poured through the Blackwood estate's windows, gilding the walls with golden light. Birds sang, and the city below was waking, but inside, a calm, unshakable happiness filled the home. Vivian stood in the nursery, gently rocking Ethan Jr., who had just turned one. His laughter bubbled up, pure and unrestrained, and for the first time in years, Vivian allowed herself to feel completely at peace. Ethan appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, eyes soft as he watched his wife and son. "You two look like the perfect picture," he said, voice low, full of awe. Vivian smiled, glancing up at him. "We've earned it." Ethan stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "No, you've earned it. You've carried so much judgment, scrutiny, fear, and still you chose love. You chose us." She felt warmth rise in her chest. "We chose each other. That's what mattered." Ethan's gaze softened. "And it always will." Outside the estate, preparations were underway for a celebration. The Blackwoods wanted to officially welcome Vivian as a fully embraced member of the family, friends, and social community. It wasn't just a party. It was a declaration, a triumph over every whisper, every judgment, and every attempt to undermine her. The hall was adorned with ivory and gold. Flowers overflowed from every corner. Soft music floated in the air, and laughter filled the rooms. Margaret watched from the front, her eyes shining with pride. For months, she had fought old prejudices, but watching her son and Vivian together had softened every hard edge of her heart. When Vivian entered, radiant in a gown that celebrated her curves, the room seemed to pause. Whispers shifted from polite curiosity to admiration. The woman who had once been judged, whispered about, and underestimated now commanded the room. Not by wealth, not by image, but by the undeniable strength of character and love she carried. Ethan took Vivian's hand, leading her to the center of the hall. "Everyone," he said, voice ringing with warmth and conviction. "Today isn't just about celebration. It's about acknowledgement, about love, about family. Vivian is not just my wife. She is my partner, my equal, and the most courageous person I know. And I am proud, immensely proud, to call her my wife." The crowd erupted in applause. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around. Friends, family, and colleagues smiled, many wiping tears themselves. Margaret stood beside Ethan, placing a hand over her heart, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had all traveled. Vivian finally understood something she hadn't before. Happiness wasn't about perfection. It was about authenticity, courage, and the people who stood beside you when the world doubted you. As the celebration continued, Vivian and Ethan found a quiet balcony overlooking the city. Ethan Jr. slept in his stroller nearby, and the city lights twinkled like stars beneath them. Ethan pulled Vivian close. "We did it," he whispered. "We survived everything, and now we have our life, our family, our love, untouched by judgment, unshakable." Vivian rested her head on his shoulder. "It wasn't easy," she said softly, "but it was worth every struggle." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "And it always will be." They stood there, holding each other, knowing that the storms of the past had shaped them into something stronger, something unbreakable. Vivian had not only found love, she had found her voice, her power, and the unwavering truth that she belonged, unapologetically. Margaret joined them quietly, her hand resting on Vivian's shoulder. "I was foolish," she admitted, "but you've shown me what courage and love truly look like. You are part of this family, forever." Vivian looked at her, eyes soft with forgiveness. "Thank you, Margaret. That means everything." Later that evening, as the party dwindled and the last guests departed, Vivian and Ethan stood at the edge of the estate's gardens. Ethan Jr. giggled nearby, chasing fireflies, the night warm and peaceful. Vivian took Ethan's hand. "Do you ever think about that night in the club?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Ethan chuckled. "Every day. The night I met the woman who changed my life. And here we are," Vivian said, "stronger than any storm, braver than any judgment, and exactly where we're supposed to be." Ethan pulled her into a deep embrace, the world falling away until there was only them, love, family, and the promise of forever. In that moment, Vivian realized the truth. Life would always have challenges. The world would always judge. But love, the kind they shared, was untouchable. It was theirs, unshakable, eternal. And for the first time, she felt completely and undeniably free. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to leave us a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell to get notified when a new story comes up. Don't forget to tell us where you're